Hey, good Thursday morning, everybody. Welcome into the Volquest Mailbag Podcast. I am Eric Cain alongside Grant Ramey, Rob Lewis, and Brent Hubbs. As always, this podcast is presented by our friends over at Exterior Home Solutions, local and trusted since 1999. If you have a need for roofing, siding, windows, garage, whatever the case may be, give them a call today. That number is 865-524-5888 for a free estimate, or you can visit them online at exteriorhomesolutions.com. Got a lot of questions to get into here today, so let's not waste any time. We'll start with ImissDenariusMoore. Can you talk to us about this football staff and how they build the recruiting board? Is it something where the position coaches have more leeway to go and get their guys, or is it more of a collaborative effort? Is this different approach from previous staffs? Brent, how does this staff go about their board at each position on each side of the ball?
Well, I mean, it starts in the back with the recruiting office. They're pouring through huddle tape and online film and looking at those guys, looking at various positions, and you help build the board out that way for coaches to go out and evaluate in the spring and look at guys. Coaches also have their assistant coaches have their own contacts in states where they've recruited for a long time. They'll get calls and heads up on players that way. And you kind of build your database like that. And part of it is from camp. When you have kids in for camp that are, 2 years younger, they're going to be sophomores. If they perform well at camp, there you got video of it that way. And that's sort of how they build and go from there. And then you pare it down. I mean, it used to be you started build the board after their sophomore year. Now you're building boards after their 8th grade and freshman year. Is what you're ending up doing. And it starts in the back room in a collaborative effort with the assistant coaches. So the back room will send tape to assistant coaches to watch and eval, and then they'll adjust and go from there.
We'll go to Competition Orange. In the chat, it seemed like it was a given that Coach Josh Heupel would not take Nico Iamaleava to SEC Media Days. Why not? Seems like he would be one of the more obvious choices in recent years. Rob, I think Josh Heupel's very protective of his quarterbacks, always have been. He's also never had a more higher profile athlete than Nico that he's ever coached. So I think a lot of that has to do with it. But I mean, it was, kind of like the poster said, it was kind of a given. I never assumed that Nico was going to go to Media Days. Did you?
Yeah, I don't think it's obvious at all. I mean, I don't have the numbers in front of me. Grant Ramey might. I think. How many sophomores have ever been to SEC Media Day?
Especially when you have the number of seniors that this team has.
I would guess 0. I mean, I don't think that's really walking that far out on a limb. So I would say it's way less than obvious that he would take Nico. I mean, I really am betting that there have been 0 SEC football players go to Media Day.
Here's the other thing with Nico, and here comes the Eeyore, Debbie Downer, and all that kind of stuff. And that's not what I'm saying in the least.
Where's the AP bat signal? The AP bat signal up.
The guy's played 4 quarters of football. That's what he's done at this point in his career. Is he's played 4 quarters of meaningful football. No offense to the Virginia Cavaliers when you played mop-up duty there, and a couple other games where he was in after they were up 4 touchdowns and they let him play a series or maybe 2. So I think you're protective there. He's still got plenty to prove. Now look, he's the guy, he's the man, he's got plenty of talent, Grant. I think he's going to be a terrific player, but he is not the established quarterback of college football that I think a lot of people sort of perceive him to be, because he's been so high profile since he was coming out of high school.
Here's the thing. There's 2 different perspectives at work here. The fan perspective is you take the most exciting player on your roster. They would take Nico and James Pierce if that was a fan vote, and that would be that. The inside the football complex perspective for every program in the country, not just Tennessee, is to go there and not make headlines and be boring, basically. I mean, you're trying to get out of that thing without making any headlines, without anybody saying anything to. And that's not that they think Nico's going to say something stupid. But when you have the veterans on this team, the seniors that they have, a Cooper Mays and Omari Thomas or whoever, you take kind of those guys, the veterans that have been around that know how to deal with it. Not that Nico doesn't know how to deal with it. He's been dealing with it for years. But it's one less thing that you have to put on his plate, one less thing that he has to worry about. And you can take your guys who are going to, not make headlines and for lack of a better word, be boring. And they're fine with that because that's how they view that kind of setting, is they don't have really anything to gain from it. to go there and just talk and answer questions and whatever. It is what it is, and get it over with as quickly as you can.
And Hubbard, great. You guys know this. I mean, again, I don't think they ever thought about taking Nico, but if he did, if Nico was there, Joe, Mr. National clickbait columnist, talk about headlines. It's NIL. What's Nico? That's the whole. That's the whole. I mean, that's the whole narrative coming out of media days. If you take Nico,
now,
frankly, probably be the narrative if you take him next year.
It's worth noting if Nico is a star and he has some kind of like Hendon Hooker rise and numbers and leads his team to crazy places, he'll probably be there a year from now because he'll be the guy. It's not that he's not the guy now, but it's just he'll have a year under his belt. Like he's got opportunities to go in the future if he wants to go. If Tennessee wants to take him, it doesn't have to be now. So.
And make no mistake, nobody works harder at being more bland and more boring in those settings than Josh Heupel. Takes pride in it. Takes pride in the fact that he hasn't said anything, and will be so. So that's just kind of the deal. I mean, and I'll be curious to see on a bigger picture note how many people attend the media days in Dallas this year, and what that event becomes or doesn't become moving forward, because they've about made it to the point that it's almost easier just to take all the coaches and a couple players to Charlotte and do a mock or basically do the ESPN car wash over there, and then just let the local media do the local things in their own hometown where the school is. Because used to, you went to that event and you could get a one-on-one. I mean, I remember years ago, I sat down with Deuce McAllister for like 15 minutes. I have no idea why, but hey, let's talk to Deuce McAllister.
Because you were in radio.
That's why. Now you can't get them in the hallway because they're behind a curtain, they're behind a rope, because they've got to take care of, and they should take care of them because the ESPN and ABC are paying a gazillion dollars, but they've got to do all of those shows, all of their writers, all of those things, that it's really an ESPN ABC event that they kind of have a room that they broadcast for all the general media to be there. It's kind of what it's boiled down to, other than Radio Row. So what that event becomes moving forward, I think is going to be pretty interesting based on attendance in Dallas this year.
I think Amari Thomas will be one of the guys that they send, and I think he's the absolute perfect one to send because, great veteran, played a lot, well-spoken kid, going to sing praises of your program and nothing more. And that's what you want at an event like this.
Yeah, and I mean, I would think Cooper Mays is the offensive representative for Tennessee. And then if you're looking for a story, I mean, maybe Keenan Peely makes a lot of sense. Yeah. We'll see if that's what they end up doing, but that one would make some sense because he is older than Dalton Connect, which apparently is a thing. He's a guy who's been around a ton and is a good story. So I think those three guys make a lot of sense. Certainly Thomas and Cooper Mays.
All right, let's go through a couple of recruiting questions. And Matt Ray's chimed in, sent me some messages to answer these to the best of our abilities. RunThroughTheT says, who were some of the bigger targets early for the Vol football in 2026, that 2026 class, outside of Fazion Brandon? Any Vol legacies in that class? Matt chimes in, says Simeon Caldwell is a Vol legacy in the class. Via his mother, he could be a safety, but also could grow into a linebacker. He says some names to know early in that class for 2026 would be Leo Delaney, Brody Keefe, Samari Matthews, Carson Sneed, Keandre Harrison, Caden Harris, Tyler Atkinson, who we've heard of for years by now. I can't believe he's still in that class. Arian Gregory, Tyreek Green, Jonas Walton, Savion Hilter, Tyreek King, and Matt says they will swing at Jackson Cantwell and Emmanuel Jackson as well. So those are some names early on for the 2026 class.
Well, Sneed is an in-state prospect at the tight end position, which is why the loss of Bram in this class was tough. But that Tennessee will shift their focus at the tight end spot moving forward to guys like that. And then you look at where they are with Harrison's another guy that could fall into that, that category as a tight end. That's a lead. And Keith has been in town multiple times. We had a story on him earlier this week. Big wide receiver from over in North Carolina. You're seeing Tennessee do some pretty good work in North Carolina They landed David Sanders would be huge. We'll see where they are with Fazion, but you're seeing Tennessee put in some pretty good work in North Carolina and having some success, trying to have some more success here over the next couple of years.
Could the Vols win a championship at this rate of always getting low-rated DBs and safeties? Another question there for Run Through the T. It feels like, Brent, that this staff has a type of player that they like in the back end, and they recruit that type of player. They like that top. I mean, look at the class of DBs so far right now. They're not very highly rated, but they've been priorities for Tennessee, and they got them done early.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit of a stretch narrative to say that the secondary is the reason Tennessee's not won a title since Josh Heupel's been here. I don't think the secondary has played particularly great at times, but I don't think that that's just the sole Achilles for this football team. They had a really hard time getting off of the field on third down at Florida last year, but they've done some okay things in the secondary. They're obviously going to continue to be portal heavy, Grant, I think, in the secondary, which is why, the ranking part of it. I mean, look, they've got Jordan Matthews, one of the highest ranked players that they've signed since he's been here, and he's fighting to be the fourth corner right now on this team. So sometimes some of that stuff doesn't matter either. It's about getting the best fits, developing, and then obviously they're using the portal trying to use the portal to their advantage, which can negate some of that stuff as well.
I mean, honestly, I don't know the answer to the defensive back question. Here's what we have seen so far from Josh Heupel. He's pretty good at recruiting elite quarterbacks, and he's pretty good at getting quarterback production in this offense and putting up numbers. So I mean, they're always going to be, it feels like, in the hunt. If they obviously that's the most important position on the field, and if you're striking gold there and it's turning into gold on the field at this level, then you're always going to kind of be there. Obviously, you can make your life a lot easier if you put a lot more talent around him, as much talent as you can on both sides of the ball. But I mean, to me, I don't know where that factors in championship wise with the defensive backs and secondary, but quarterback's a pretty good place to start, and it feels like they're off to a really, really good start there.
Swagger 12, another recruiting question that Matt Ray will chime in on. In your opinion, which recruit is most likely to commit to the Vols that is not a current lean to Tennessee? Brent, I would love your opinion on this as well, but Matt says this one's tough. Said that he would say right now it would be Juan Gaston. He has been a heavyweight battle, and Georgia's been the long-viewed favorite. Said, I think Tennessee is more than a dark horse in this race and could still find a way to win this one in the end. So Matt says Juan Gaston. Would you have one that you would throw into that mix?
I mean, I think you got a pretty good feel for where a lot of guys are right now. So I mean, Gaston makes some sense. We'll see where they are with Christian Gass. Is there a leader there? I don't know. I don't know how many are perceived leans. I mean, we did Card Sharks last week on the podcast, and we were about at 50% with everybody, right? I mean, it wasn't like there was a lot of 80%. Austin's running a GIF on something. So how many guys are truly leaning right now versus it being wide open? I mean, like, I think Tennessee's done as well as they can do with David Sanders, but is he leaning anywhere right now publicly? Do we know for sure which way he's leaning? So I don't know. I think that I'm with Man. I think that's a tough question. I think Gaston's just a complete unknown because I don't think anybody knows what Juan Gaston's thinking. And I think Juan Gaston loves the fact that nobody knows what Juan Gaston is thinking right now. I think that makes him very happy.
However, how crazy is it that you can, we're at the start of July and, literally, I mean, like most kids are down to 5, if not 3, if not 2 schools. 10, 12 years ago, guys didn't even know who their 5 official visits were.
Yeah, you got 16 commits right now. It's July.
They literally did not know who they were going to visit.
Which again is why I think you'll see if they're going to indeed make July a dead month, which is what the talk is. I think you'll continue to see some people talk about doing a late summer signing day. I mean, you're going to be sitting here at the end of July if you're Tennessee, and basically you're done. I mean, you're maybe recruiting a couple of guys, you're evaluating some guys, but you're basically done, and you're just hanging on to December, which is what everybody in the country is essentially going to end up doing. That's why I think there'll be some continued talk. It was completely shot down when it was brought up this time around, but I don't think that is going to completely go away, that conversation about whether or not it's beneficial to have a middle of July signing day or a July 8th signing day or something like that. I don't know that we'll ever get there, but that's the merit for it, because your recruiting class is essentially done at the end of July. If it's not, then your recruiting class is in trouble. It's in real trouble. It's kind of like, if you're still looking for guys back in the old days, what would we, if you were looking for a guy,
Pearl Harbor, Hubbard was a Pearl Harbor.
If you found a guy after Pearl Harbor Day, after December the 7th, the guy probably wasn't a very good player.
Nope.
If your evaluation and that guy popped up on your board the 1st of January and you hadn't been recruiting him for the last 5 months, probably wasn't. Now there were some exceptions, but for the most part, if it came after that date, then you were reaching. And nobody wants to be reaching in the recruiting class. And nobody is reaching with the advent of the portal. Why reach? I mean, save the spot and go get somebody out of the portal that's proven something to you. What's the point in reaching it, in this day and age of college football?
Our Train 98 says, rank these safeties in order. This should be pretty good. Rob, I want to start with you on this one. Dale Carter, Deon Grant, Eric Berry. It says all were obviously great players during their times at Tennessee. Do you have any good stories on any of them, specifically Dale Carter? Always heard that he was a bad dude that nobody wanted to mess with. So Dale Carter, Deon Grant, Eric Berry.
I've got a couple of Dale Carter stories, and they won't see the light of day on this podcast. Man, golly! I mean, Deon Grant was a great player. He's 3. I mean, that's, and he was a great player. All SEC. Was he an All-American? I mean, he was a great. Deon Grant was a great player. He's 3, and it's not even close. Man, you know what? I had never thought about this, but Dale Carter 1, Eric Berry 2. I just did it, Hubbard. I just did it.
I mean, that would be where I would go, just because of Dale Carter's size. And Dale Carter, if you want to know how good of an athlete Dale Carter was as a college player, he left the college game as a safety and became an all-pro corner. Nobody goes that direction in football when you go up a level. Most of the time, it's a corner who becomes a safety because he lacks this or he lacks that. This guy was a knock-your-head-off safety who went and became a true cover corner in the National Football League and was an all-pro. I've got a lot of Dale Carter stories. The statute of limitations are up on those. I don't know how many I'm going to share. I will share this Dale Carter story. Dale Carter liked to go out. He liked to hang out into the wee hours of the morning. And if you were late for meetings, you would have to run. Trooper Trader called it Breakfast Club, which meant like 5 a.m. runs if you were late for something. If you got so many lates, then you had to run at 5 a.m. And the legendary story on Dale Carter was that he had a 5 a.m. run, and he came into the complex, and the clothes that he had been out in that night had not been to bed, basically stripped down into his boxers, ran gassers until the coaches got tired of him running and got bored with it. And he looked at him and said, "Am I done?" And he went home and took a shower and went to bed. The guy was an elite athlete who could go like the wind. There's the famous Sinbad story at Auburn during a timeout where he told the assistant coaches where he basically called the defense, and he called the Sinbad defense, and nobody really knew what he was talking about. And the Sinbad defense was send this bad blankety blank in on a blitz is what he called. And what
I'm sorry, I didn't get that one.
Again. The Sinbad defense. Dale Carter was elite in so many ways. Deon Grant, my famous story with Deon Grant was we were all trying to find out if Deon Grant was a qualifier, and Deon Grant couldn't find his test score. And he found it under his bed, and it was a qualifying test score. And he was going to be a qualifier. It wasn't fraudulent because his other school was Georgia Tech. I mean, it's not like he was, it was, if he doesn't find this score, he's going to Hargrave or he's going to JUCO. It wasn't that. But he literally couldn't find his test score. And it wasn't filed anywhere, but he found it like in January in his bedroom. And to this day, I joke with Dale Carter about, or not Dale Carter, but Deon Grant about losing his test score somewhere in his bedroom. I said, it sounds like my bedroom growing up. You lose lots of things. But I would pick Dale Carter based on size, even though Eric Berry's a great player.
I was going to say, let's not sell. Eric's the best football player I've seen at Tennessee in the 22 years I've been doing
Sure.
this. That's how good Dale Carter was, in my opinion.
The fascinating thing about
phenomenal.
Yeah, about both those players, Rob, and that's why I think they're 1A and 1B, is if you put Eric Berry at quarterback or running back in the SEC, he would have been successful. Not throwing the ball as a quarterback, but he could have done every wildcat package you ever wanted him to be, and he could have played offense. He could have played running back. He could have played slot receiver. Okay? You could have taken Dale Carter and moved him out wide and said, hey, run a post, run a takeoff, and we'll throw you a wide receiver screen, and he might have been an all-conference player out there at wide receiver. Both those guys were that kind of athlete. And maybe Deon Grant could have done the same thing. The difference to me between the three of those is Deon was much more finesse in the back end. Roman center field. Dale Carter would absolutely deplete you, and so would Eric Berry.
And
the
physicality Sean Marino.
Yeah, the physicality that those two played with was different than Deon Grant's physicality.
Ask Tim Tebow. I mean, he did the same thing to Tebow.
Yep.
Was that in the swamp, right? I'll say this I was probably crapping in diapers when Dale Carter was playing at Tennessee. I was in school at Tennessee when Eric Berry was there. I think he's the best player I've ever seen when I was old enough to appreciate just how elite he was and on a different level. Now, for Deon Grant, as a child of the 90s, that one-handed pick against Florida, that might have been like the moment from the 98 season, like non-Fiesta Bowl moment that maybe stands out the most, because how long had it been since they had that kind of moment against Florida? And it felt like that was going to be something different, maybe because of a play like that. And just wearing number 7, Roman at safety, that was, for a child of the 90s, he was about as cool as it got.
Yeah, and that was a play that's the play Florida always broke your back with. They made a play like that broke your back. Hey, we're in it, and all of a sudden, kaboom, floodgates open. And that was that kind of play. And Dale Carter gave one of the greatest quotes ever after that game about that interception, when he said he didn't know how he got that high to get it, but he said that the angels lifted him. And they lifted him that night for that one-handed snare. That was you're right. That is – outside of maybe the Sterner stumble and fumble that saved the season, that is the play when you start running highlight reels. You're looking for that one, along with a couple of Al Wilson forced fumbles along the way. But that was an unbelievable play.
We've got plenty more questions to get into, but first, let's get a word from our proud sponsors, Exterior Home Solutions.
Severe weather can strike at any time in East Tennessee, and Mother Nature can do severe damage to the first and most important line of defense that you and your family have against Mother Nature, and that is your roof. Whenever she strikes, make sure that you call the people that I call. Make sure you trust the people that I trust, and that's my friends at Exterior Home Solutions, because they're more than friends, they're truly family.
Give Exterior Home Solutions a call today for a free estimate. That phone number is 865-524-5888, or you can visit them online at exteriorhomesolutions.com. All right, we'll jump back into it. Let's go to DavyVol. What is the most important coaching trait that Tony Vitello has that has allowed him to be so successful at Tennessee? All you guys can chime in on this one if you want to, but for me, it's always like you got to be able to spot talent, evaluate it, spot it, sign it, and then develop it. It's all very important. And he assembled his staff that, is obviously, one of the best in the country with Frank Anderson, Josh Elander, and all this support staff. But my answer to this would be, being able to, he's just a relentless recruiter. And that's kind of where it starts for me. So evaluating talent, not only evaluating talent, but being able to recruit those players to Tennessee, get it across the finish line, survive the draft, where, again, that he doesn't play much into that factor. But I would start with recruiting for Tony. He's a great developer, obviously, just won a national championship. But, Grant, I would start the conversation with recruiting for Tony.
I'm going to go outside the box and say undivided attention, because this Tennessee baseball program, that's his life. What else does he? Yep. He's got family, obviously, but he's a single dude. The amount of work he puts into it, both recruiting, both developing talent, both being a player's coach, both, it's so hard to pick just like one thing because he seems so elite in so many different categories. And I think you've seen that because of the way how quickly he's built this into not only a winner, but winning at an elite level and winning consistently. And now he's got a national championship to his credit. Like, I think I just can't imagine many people work harder than he works, because what else is he working on? Like, he's so obsessed with this baseball program, and you're seeing what happens now because of that obsession. Like, he's a great recruiter. He's a great developer of talent. He's a great players coach. Obviously, the guys that play for him, what they've said on social media in the last couple of weeks about playing for him and all that stuff. Like, I don't know how you pick one when he seems like he's so elite in so many different categories.
Yeah, I mean, I think one other trait that you would put in there that makes him elite is I think he's an elite leader. I think he lets his coaches coach. I think he checks his ego at the door. Listen, this guy's ego should be through the roof, right? I mean, he's got the world, he's got the college baseball world by the hands right now. You know, he's the king of the mountain at Tennessee, single dude, living the good life, right? But in so many ways, he's unassuming, which seems very contradictory, right? But I think with the locker room, he lets his guys lead. I think he understands when it's time to step in and do what he needs to do, but it's also when it's time to let his guys go do their thing, whether it's his staff members, whether it's his strength coach, whether it's players managing other players. I think the guy's got elite leadership to go with that undivided attention. I don't know that there's many coaches in the country that have a better finger on their program without being a dictatorship and completely controlling their program than what Tony Vitello has right now.
And at the end of the day, to be elite, to be a champion, I mean, it's not just one trait. I know that's not what the posts were saying. It's not just one trait. It's several, and Tony Vitello possesses a whole lot of those. Volquest05 says, what is the plan looking like for the entertainment district? Will it be a mini version of the Atlanta Battery with a large group watch spot for games? What's the latest there, Brent?
I think we're waiting to see what some design stuff looks like. Obviously, there's going to be a hotel there, so that changes a little bit of that. You don't have near the space that you're talking about in Atlanta that they have. I mean, that's a pretty tight deal, kind of tight quarters there. If you put a hotel there, what exactly that looks like, I think remains to be seen. I'm fascinated to see what the design of it is, because I mean, how big is the hotel? How much space is that going to take up? If it does, how much does that limit how many restaurants, shops, all those types of things you can have there? Some different stuff like that. I think it's an interesting concept. I want to see a little more reality of the concept to know exactly what that thing is going to be, because I think from a concept standpoint, there's a lot of things that make sense about it. But I still think there's some things that you go, oh, year round, how does this work? Now, it could be great for concerts, to stay at a hotel there. That'd be pretty good. So, but it's not the biggest area. I mean, if you've been to Atlanta, I mean, guys, that deal's big. I mean, there's a lot of space in the Atlanta deal. That is not going to have a ton of space between the stadium, the arena, and the engineering building. Stuff you can get in there, I think, is going to be interesting.
And this is timely, given everybody, probably some people maybe doing the lottery. And if G10 goes away, I mean, this is not the question, but parking on campus. If you get rid of G10, nightmare.
Yeah, well, I mean, and there's no way. I mean, the top level might go away, which would affect tailgating, but they cannot do away with that garage from a student perspective and that type of thing. I mean, it's just impossible. That garage has to stay in some capacity. So again,
it might be 6 stories underground.
Right. What is that? What exactly does that look like? I want to see renderings, Grant. I want to see, I got to have a better feel for it than just a concept of doing something to know what that thing's going to be.
I mean, to me, it feels like kind of like a pipe dream still. Like, we were talking about this thing last summer, and I feel like it hasn't taken a step forward, at least publicly. I mean, behind the scenes, maybe something different's happened. Like, it's almost like check back in 5 years and see kind of what the progress is at that point, because you have Neyland renovations going on. You're trying to build basically a brand new Lindsey Nelson Stadium. You've got stuff going on with basketball too. That's obviously more minor at Thompson Bowling Arena, but there's stuff that it's not like this is the only thing on
training
campus.
facility.
Anderson training facility. They're still trying to build those cornhole boards, and basketball courts.
Here's the thing about that, and I'm with you but I mean, are they going to farm it out like they're going to do the dorms? Because I mean, they're going to get some dorm rooms done before they may get a dorm room built before they get the Anderson Training Center done. Because some I mean, if you've been on campus lately, I mean, they have absolutely just manhandled that parking lot at the corner there across from Gibbs Hall. I mean, it looks like they're getting ready to put in footers and go to town to build a dorm there. And you're still trying to get some concrete poured in the Anderson Training Center side of things. So you don't have all the funding stuff with the state. So maybe you can do that with a third party. But again, it's tight. I mean, there's just not a ton of space there. So we'll see if they get it to that point that they're actually bidding some design stuff, which allegedly they're right at the cusp of being able to do that and go from there. But if they do it, it'll be a third party group that puts that thing together, and basically the university is going to lease the land to them, kind of like what they're doing with some of the other dorm rooms. But I got to see it. I hate to sound like that, Rob Lewis. I got to see it to believe it. I got to believe it to see it. You know what I mean?
They need to hire whoever's got 75 cranes on Cumberland Avenue building 14 different apartment buildings, and there's about a half a lane for traffic. And I mean, you talk about building stuff quick in a small space and leaving just nowhere to move. Like from 15 years ago when I was in school to now, I completely don't even recognize the place. Hire that person, whoever that is.
So you're saying don't hire the Alcoa Highway contractor or the 640 contractor at this point with those paving projects?
Listen, I remember the first time I drove on Alcoa Highway when they had started construction. I was going to a Butch Jones year one press conference. That's how long it's been.
Just to be clear here on the Volquest podcast, we love all contractors, and we appreciate you guys listening. So, Brett Hubbs, catch your breath here. You are our expert on a lot of things here, but especially construction. ThatVolGuy says, I know there's been a talk of a timeline for baseball stadium renovations shifting, meaning the project won't be completed at the start of the 2025 season. But I also read a comment here recently that suggested the scope of the project might be scaled down, much the same way schools like Ole Miss are delaying things or even canceling the facility upgrades to focus the money on football. I didn't see any follow-up. I have no idea if that comment came from a credible source, so I'm just curious if anything's changed or if it's full steam ahead with the original $9,500 million plan. Brent, it's a 3-year, as we said, it's a 3-year phase they're trying to cram into 2 off seasons. So that's the issue here.
They're not going to get done in 2 off seasons. That's very clear.
Yeah.
But this is, I don't know the scope of the Ole Miss project. I mean, that's a newer stadium. I don't know what they were doing. But they are not going to scale back what they're doing at Lindsey Nelson Stadium because that's for fan experience. And in this day and age, when you're fighting for dollars and you're fighting for viewership, you got to have a quality fan experience, and they're trying to enhance that fan experience at Lindsey Nelson Stadium. So I don't think that they're going to scale back from the original plan. What they're going to do, and I think this is smart on their part, is they're going to take care of the season ticket holders that have supported that program through a lot of dark days. And so they're going to focus on those people before they do get all the suites done and all those types of things. They want to make the fan experience for the longtime season ticket holder a better experience for them, which is what they're working on right now down the right field line. Some of the concourse stuff, we'll see if they get the restrooms done, which is they're trying to get. I think they're going to try to get those done. I don't know that concessions will get completely redone, and then we'll see what they get done press box wise and start of the suites and that type of thing. But the utility work, somebody had this on the board 6 weeks ago, and they're 100% right. The utility work there has been much more involved than I think anybody initially thought it would be. And as a result of that, you're not going to be able to cram 3 phases into 2 years or 2 off seasons.
And it's all over the place too. It's that road. It's beyond right field. It's Todd. I get the roads mixed up. Todd Helton's behind the stadium. Ryder's at the stadium.
Yeah, that's behind the stadium.
It's Todd Helton. I mean, it's all the way around that ballpark. Utility issues. So So we'll see. We'll track this offseason and see how much they get done. Let's go to Sam Smith, 2233. Cain, Tennessee's big game hunting in the transfer portal. How do you balance getting dudes, but also leaving room for your top-ranked freshman classes and trying not to upset team chemistry? I mean, it's easy to kind of say this. They're like right now, like that's what fall's for. Like fall, you figure it out, and we know about the scholarship restrictions and kind of how all that works. And so nobody's like on full scholarship, but you have an equalizer now, as Luke Lipsy has explained it to me several times with NIL and all that. But you go out there and you try to build the best team you can. And a lot of times you're not going to go out there and publicize the guy you're after in the portal because you don't want to, ruffle the water or anything with some current guys on your team. But you're trying to go out there and sign some guys from the portal and hope you survive the draft. And then you figure out the numbers and you figure out everything else in the fall. I know this staff loves the guys they had on roster this year that didn't play. Some of those guys like Blake Grimmer that wasn't on active roster, Hunter Hayes, a lot of those guys, they love this incoming freshman class and know that they're going to lose some of them. I mean, there's 6 of those guys are at MLB Pipeline's top 250. You're going to lose some of them, but also not all of those 6 are going to go. So they love the incoming, talent they have. You just go out there, try to build your roster, and then you simply just kind of figure it out in the fall. I know that's a simple answer, but that's all I got right now.
Well, and I think Tony, I think the other thing we talk about qualities of Tony, I think Tony's transparency with his team is a big factor in this as well. I think guys know what they're getting into when you come here. I don't think there's a lot of promises thrown out, and I think everybody knows they've got to go earn it. And I think Tony's clear with his returning players, and I think there's plenty enough transparency there that makes your locker room work a little bit. I mean, it would have changed because of the portal, but I mean, in '94, Philip Fulmer, Rob, then came in, I guess it was 93 or 92, whatever. Philip Fulmer came in and told, after Little Man Stewart and Aaron Hayden's freshman year, hey, you guys had great years. By the way, sit down and watch this tape. This is the #1 junior college tailback in the country, and he's coming to the program. And I think Tony offers up that kind of transparency to his team so that there's no surprises there.
Yeah, and we've talked about it on the podcast. I've definitely written about it, but I think when you're talking about transparency, in recruiting, there's always been some level of kind of chicanery about salesmanship or whatever you want to call it. In this day and age with the transfer portal, if you're lying in recruiting, you're going to lose that kid, in the spring semester of his freshman year. I mean, that's in all sports, not just baseball with Tony, but I mean, it behooves you to be an honest, transparent football, basketball, baseball coach in this day and age. Because I mean, if you tell lies and the playing time or whatever you promised doesn't materialize, that kid's gone. And I think Rick's great at that. I think Josh Heupel and his staff are great at that. And I think Tennessee's benefiting in all 3 sports because, of how their head coaches, their philosophy in recruiting.
Over the last week since the national championship, we've been talking about you love this storyline, you love this storyline. There's so many for a national championship winning team. But again, another one that I just love, the story of, and Tony mentioned this in a press conference setting, I think when they started fall ball back in like September, October. Like, it went out and got Dalton Bargo, who at the time was a DH freshman over at Missouri, but he was a catcher, right? I mean, he can still catch, but he's more of a utility now, but he was a catcher. Go ahead and get Cannon Peebles. Huge. Cal Stark calls Tony Vitello and says, hey, like, do you still want me? Like, is there still a spot for me? He said, yeah, let's get to work. Absolutely. I want you here. Let's get to work. And nobody backs down from it. And so I love that story as well. And, of course, we know how big of a role that Cal Stark played on this national championship team. Another question here from Sam Smith. Rank these quarterbacks. That's a good question. Tennessee will see in 2024. Grant, Grayson, McCall, Jackson Arnold, Brock Vandagriff, or Graham Mertz?
I still have Graham Mertz PTSD from Gainesville and some of the plays he made down there. Obviously, it's going to be a different story on the road in Knoxville trying to make
a good year last
plays.
Year. Much better year than I thought he would.
To be honest, Brock Vandagriff, I don't have a clue about him except from his recruiting days. I believe Tennessee was in that one for a while. I can't remember how many years ago that was. Jackson Arnold, it seems like everybody talks highly of Oklahoma, so I'd assume Jackson Arnold could play ball, and it's probably going to start with him. And Grayson McCall is probably the more veteran of the bunch. Would I be wrong in saying that, Tubbs?
No, I mean, Mertz has played a bunch, and Grayson McCall has played a bunch. I think the question with McCall is there a transition to him moving, quote, up a level in football, or has he played enough against high-quality competition that there's not that there? To me, Brock Vandagriff is just an old freshman because he just hasn't played. I mean, he just doesn't have any – he doesn't have really any more experience than Nico or Jackson Arnold has. So, I think that Arnold-Nico competition is pretty fascinating because those are two very young, high-profile guys that everybody that their fan base are riding high on, but neither one of them has done a whole lot. They played a bowl game, essentially, is what they've done. So we'll see. I think the McCall deal at NC State is really intriguing because I'm curious to see how he is with a new offensive coordinator and what that turns into, because he's had some moments where you go, that guy's can play. That guy's really good. How much does he change what NC State is offensively? I think is going to be, it can make that game a much more interesting game than a lot of people thought it would be back in January.
I think looking at it from this perspective, when does Tennessee play these quarterbacks? Because I think at the end of the day, Jackson Arnold will be the best quarterback of that bunch, right? But will he be the best quarterback of that bunch week 4? That's when Tennessee plays him. Tennessee plays Grayson McCall week 2. So that's good for Tennessee, right? I mean, Brock Vandagriff, you think that by the time Tennessee-Kentucky play, I mean, that's, towards November.
It should be established, yeah.
Yeah, and the same for Graham Mertz, who's played a ton of football, obviously. But looking at it from the perspective of when Tennessee plays these guys, I think kind of favors the Vols a little bit in terms of Jackson Arnold and Grayson McCall.
I didn't rank them. I failed to answer Sam's question here. I'm going to go Jackson Arnold number 1. I'm going to go Grayson McCall number 2, Brock number 3, and Graham number 4 because of Florida's schedule, and it feels like this could be a disastrous season for Florida if things don't go really, really well in a lot of different games because their schedule, the way it's loaded, is going to be tough.
Not saying he won the Heisman or anything. I know we got to move on, but just typical talking head, right? All offseason last year, I'm like, Graham Mertz is awful. He was terrible at Wisconsin. Going to the SEC now, this is going to be a disaster. And all that dude did was have a really solid year in the SEC. I was like, all right, too bad they're going to have to play that freshman because Billy Napier is going to be coaching for his life there in October and November, so he's going to have to go to the wayside a little bit. Zeusify, speaking of NC State, is NC State playing on Thursday before our game an advantage to them or not really a factor, Rob Lewis? I think, honestly, I know coaches want all the practice they can get, but I think that's more of a fan narrative than anything. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I mean, it's a small thing. Like maybe, if you have a running back that's, turns an ankle or something, I mean, then having 2 more days is a big deal. Preparation wise, I think it's kind of a bunch of nothing.
You're playing Chattanooga in the opener. Get your starters off the field early, and it's not a big deal.
Also, you are using some of your camp time to prepare for NC State. Like not a lot, but
you're using Chattanooga week to prepare for NC State.
Exactly. That's the thing. You're using Chattanooga week.
Chattanooga, but that's now. I mean, coaches will see that NC State, and this is why Josh Heupel had interest in playing the opener on Thursday night. Grant, NC State you can start camp 1 month prior to your first game, so they'll open camp 2 days earlier than Tennessee will.
Yeah.
So that's 2 days extra of practice time where the coaches have their hands on them, and it's not just a strength coach doing some, agility drills. It's 2 extra football days, and that's what coaches are looking for. If Josh Heupel could open every season on Thursday night, he would gladly do so.
Yeah, I mean, in football, it does make a difference. 2 days makes it like watch Thursday night football and compare that product to what you see on Sundays or Monday night football. Like, it does make a difference. But we keep saying no offense to Chattanooga and then saying highly offensive stuff about Chattanooga. it's Chattanooga. Like, it is what it is. It's the circle.
It's like all those, decommitment graphics and I'm entering the transfer portal. I love the school. I love this school. I love this school. And saying this,
I'm leaving.
I'm leaving this school. Pine, we got a couple more we got to get to. Pine says, the most popular man on the GQ since Monday night. Thank you, Austin Price. Could Will Brooks be the Zander Sechrist of the football team this year? Can you break down his game, his athleticism, and what the coaches see in him. Rob, I'm not going to pretend like I know everything about Will Brooks, but I do know he's been in the program for a long time. He's played a lot of football. He's a guy that Tim Banks trusts. And what we know is they go with who they trust and experience over anything else in the secondary. And that's why Will Brooks will be one of the top safeties off the bench, when Tennessee needs one, in my opinion. And I know the question in the Monday Night Chat was, will he start? He's not a long-term starter, but he's the guy that's going to play, and he played a lot last year.
Yeah, I don't want to disparage the kid at all. I mean, he's a great story, but I would just, to answer the question, I would say no, he will not be the Zander Sechrist. I don't think he's going to be the Tennessee football equivalent of the guy, starting the national championship game on the mound. I'll say under.
So no Will Brooks statues in the near future, because they better build one for Zander.
I mean, we're going to put it's going to look like everybody wants the baseball stadium to look like the Disney World statues, right? Where you go in and there's Andy Griffith and there's 65 other head statues. I mean, everybody doesn't get a statue. We're not putting up 12 statues around Lindsey Nelson Stadium of this one particular team. I love Zander Sechrist. I think it's a great story. I mean, if you're going to put a statue up around there, the guy you put a statue up of is going into Cooperstown later this month. That's your statue. His name's Todd Helton. No offense to the championship team. They should be recognized. They should be on display. But we're not putting up 7 statues of members of the national championship team around Lindsey Nelson Stadium.
Grant, he's saying national champions, who cares, right? I mean,
that's not what I'm saying.
That's what he said, Grant.
No, that is not what I'm saying. I'm saying we don't need 12 statues. We don't need Tony Vitello and the 12 statues around him. It's not what we're going to do around that stadium.
Well, there's a kind of a fix here for a Zander Sechrist statue. All you need is a bronze mound with a hat laying on the mound.
Yeah. There you go.
That's the statue.
Very well said. And listen, I think, and I've said this, I think he was the best story on this baseball team. On a team that had a ton of great stories, I would put him up there as the best or one of the best stories on this team. I think it's phenomenal what he did, but we're not putting statues up for everybody everywhere.
And if Will Brooks is going to be Zander Sechrist, get him about 14 chin straps and buckle him every different way you can buckle him, because that helmet's not the same on.
All right, a couple more from Pine. Which current 3-star commit do you think might get a bump? And then he says, which 3-star commit do you think is the most underrated or really good fit for UT? And he lists all the 3-star commits Tennessee currently has signed here. From Matt Ray says, I think this entire list is pretty underrated. Charles House is a 4-star already by On3. He could be in line for a bigger bump. Petit, Redmond, Lewis are all guys that fit well into Tennessee's secondary. The Vols see them being able to play all 5 positions in the secondary. A lot of these 3-stars too, Brett. I mean, they've been in the class for a while. Tennessee sought them, evaluated them, recruited them, and got them done early. They obviously like a lot of these guys.
Yeah, no doubt. And we'll see how all of these defensive backs develop and what happens with those guys and where it comes from there. I like Dodson on the offensive side of the ball as a guy, as a 3-star who I think has got a chance to have a really good year moving forward. So I think it's about how they fit in the secondary. I don't know about huge bumps for anybody at this point in time. We'll see as their senior season progresses on whether or not somebody gets a big bump or not.
We'll get to 2 more questions, and apologies, I know there's a lot more questions. We just couldn't fit it in this week, but we do appreciate it. Let's go to Rheltney for life. What is UT looking for in the transfer portal?
Everything.
I'll run through the list here again. At the end of the day, they want a couple of bats. They would love an infield bat. They love an outfield bat. They need some left-handed pitching in a big way because you're losing some key lefties. Zander, Kirby, Stamos, some guys who threw for you this year. Of course, Matthew Dallas went in the portal. Gavin Keelan's the infielder from Louisville, arguably the best player in the portal. Tennessee, LSU, Florida, very much in on that one. Miles Patton, Long Beach State lefty. You've got, of course, Tanner Franklin committed to Tennessee on Tuesday or Wednesday, whatever day it was. Cade Fisher, a lefty from Florida, freshman All-American in 23, Friday night starter at the beginning of the year. Tennessee's in on that one as well. And, of course, the Texas A&M guys went ahead and went back to Texas A&M. Tennessee had interest there for sure, but knew that was likely the case. So there'll be more names and everything, but Tennessee's attacking the best of the best. And I do believe there'll be some visitors this weekend, and we'll work to get that list to you guys as well. Unfortunately, Ariel Antiqua's early season injury caused us not to get a glimpse of his full all-around potential. What are reasonable expectations offensively for him going forward? I think we get so caught up because Tennessee's been so spoiled with some really good offensive numbers from the shortstop position. Sure, Maui was so hyped coming in and all that, and maybe he underperformed at times at the plate, but he was a really good shortstop. Liam Spence was a really good shortstop for Tennessee. Dean Curley this year did a lot of great things as a true freshman shortstop for a national championship winning team. At the end of the day, just like catcher, that shortstop, you're there to play defense. And what you do at the plate is a plus. That is how they view that here in the Tennessee program. So with Ariel's ability to play defense, I mean, he's going to be just fine. Also, he was one of Tennessee's better hitters in the fall. Like, he can hit. He just missed all those ABs in the early season because of his hand, and it was hard to play catch up. So expectations, hit 270, hit 280, play good defense, and you're going to be in that everyday lineup, in my opinion. Last one. Pick a win that would mean the most and a loss that would mean that would hurt the worst in the upcoming season for Josh Heupel out of this grouping. Oklahoma, Alabama, Georgia. Which win would mean the most? Which loss would hurt the most?
I think the win that would mean the most is Georgia, because you haven't beat them, and they're at the top. They're at the top of the mountain right now in college football.
And the loss would be Oklahoma.
And the loss would be Oklahoma, because it's Josh Heupel going back to Oklahoma. It's their first.
You didn't say Alabama? At home after the king is dead.
I can give you that. I can. I mean, for this team to be a playoff team, they've got to be a win-loss team coming out of the Alabama game. So that means Oklahoma or Alabama. I mean, you can split there, but you're going to have to win the rest of those games that you need to win if they're going to be. To me, if they're going to be a playoff team, I think that's what you have to do.
Well, they'll be an underdog at Oklahoma. I mean, there'll be no shame in losing that game on the road. I mean, I think they might be a favorite at home against Alabama.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, when you look at it that way, Alabama makes more sense.
I still think you have a better chance of winning that game, in my opinion, because the Oklahoma team is good, but I mean, Alabama's roster is still pretty good, Rob. I mean, they still got a really, really good quarterback that done a whole lot of things in college. I mean, I'm not saying you're going to lose that game. I'm just saying you got a good chance to win on the road when you look at those two games.
Touchdown underdog at Oklahoma.
I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying, like,
you just said they had a better chance to win at Oklahoma. So you said I'm wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with that statement. What do you think, Grant?
I think you're going to be fine if you lose at Oklahoma. It just looks so much different if you go out there and win in September. I think it just sets such a different tone for the rest of the season. Like, you can survive that game, and that's the one that I would pick that probably hurts, because it's early in the season. It's Heupel going back to Oklahoma. It's all that stuff. There's going to be it's Oklahoma's first SEC game. There's going to be so much around that game. It's going to be made into such a big deal. Like, winning that game would make a pretty huge statement. I think what you gain the most is going to Georgia and beating Georgia, because they're probably going to be the number one team in the country. They're the best team in college football. They have been for X number of years now. And you just beat Alabama a couple years ago. Like, if they didn't beat Alabama in 2022, then I think it would be a different discussion about how big an Alabama win would be in 2024. That's not to say that game's not huge, and another win over Alabama wouldn't be huge. But when it's grouped with these other two, based on where Oklahoma is in the schedule and kind of everything that goes with that, and then what Georgia is later on and going on the road for that game, I think those are the two answers.
Well, and here's the interesting thing about Alabama, and I think, Rob, you're making this point too, is we don't know what Alabama's going to be. Now, they're going to have a bunch of talent, but we don't know how that coaching transition is going to be. So what if they struggle early, as they make that coaching transition? Rob, there's going to be a lot of assumption if they lose a game or two early in the year, losing a game early, there'll be a lot of assumption that, they're primed for the taking for Tennessee, which means at home, if you don't handle that, then that one's more painful, because you do have them at home. And Josh Heupel has been so good at home with his football program. I mean, they've been really good in Knoxville. There will be, I think if you ask most fans today, a lot of fans see the Alabama game as a more winnable game than Oklahoma, which is where you're at, right? Right, Rob?
Oh, yeah.
Which would mean that the Alabama loss was a loss to Alabama would be more painful than a loss to Oklahoma in the eyes of a lot of people, which I can see that point. I don't disagree with that. I think the Oklahoma thing is interesting. 2 young quarterbacks playing in their first big ball game. Now, you're going to NC State ahead of time, so some would say Nico's got one under his belt. Oklahoma's got, a home game early in the year against somebody at Tulane or somebody. I think that's pretty good.
They play Tulane the week before. They play Houston 2 weeks before.
Yeah, so they're playing a couple pretty good teams prior to, but this will be their first SEC game. How does their young quarterback handle that moment? How does Nico handle that moment? Makes that a pretty fascinating matchup.
I just don't think that, at the end of the day, I don't think Alabama's going to be who Alabama is anymore for the next 10, 15 years. But, I mean, there's still so much talent on that roster. And I know you're getting that game at home, and it's a huge win or a huge game, and I think Tennessee can absolutely win that game. Still more talent on that roster, significantly, in my opinion, than that of Oklahoma. That's just my opinion, though. All right, yeah, appreciate you guys for sending in all those questions. Plenty more that we didn't get to, so apologies there. But we'll come back and answer more a week from today. Of course, I hope you guys enjoy your 4th of July holiday out on the water, whatever the case is. If you're watching this episode, this podcast on YouTube, go ahead and check out the promo code on the screen right now, and you can join the family for just $1. And we got tons of stuff over on the General's Quarters, recruiting, baseball, football camp starts in just a couple of weeks, and tons of basketball news throughout the summer months as well. So there's no better time to join us over on the General's Quarters and Volquest.com than right now. Appreciate Exterior Home Solutions for making this coverage possible. 865-524-5888 for a free estimate. Of course, you can visit them online at exteriorhomesolutions.com as well. For Grant Ramey, Rob Lewis, Brent Hubbs, I am Eric Cain. Thanks so much for joining us here on the Volquest Mailbag Podcast.